I'm Luke Carlson, and for almost 2 decades, my law firm, Carlson Law, has been at the forefront of defending homeowners against overreaching HOAs. We're not just leading the charge, we've created the go-to playbook on how to fight back effectively. Join us as we delve into the world of HOA disputes, sharing insights from our extensive experience and landmark victories. Throughout this podcast, we'll bring you in-depth interviews, demystify complex legal principles, and provide practical tips to safeguard your rights. While the information provided shouldn't be taken as legal advice, our aim is to empower you with the knowledge, strategies, and real-life success stories needed to navigate and overcome the challenges posed by overreaching HOAs. Hi, Luke Carlson of Carlson Law and the host of Bad HOA. Welcome to the show. I have Marty, the producer. Marty, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. Always fun to be here.
Thanks for being here, and a very special episode actually today.
Yeah, this is a fun one. This is one that we've been looking forward to for quite some time.
And the release of this episode is also very interesting because it celebrates the 1-year anniversary of the show. Yeah,
so if you're listening to this is dropping on Tuesday, April 22nd, which just so happens to be a coincidence of the first episode we ever produced of the show when it went live.
Yeah, and this is, it just sometimes the universe works in a very interesting way.
Yeah.
Because it's also April 22nd is the release of our book, Bad HOA.
Yes, that is exciting. You got to show the people.
All right, I'll show you the people. We finally have a hard copy. And it is officially in stores now, Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
And it was interesting. You know, I did not know April 22nd was the release of the first episode.
Isn't that funny how,
yes.
What a fun coincidence
Very
that
fun.
is.
Yeah.
As they would say, kismet, right?
Something like that. I believe that is the word. So today's episode, Marty, I really want to sort of go through the book, you know, why it was written and how I believe it will ultimately empower a population who has felt very powerless for a very long time against these bad HOAs.
Well, first, let me say it's a pretty darn good book. I have been privy to the book, the earliest drafts of it, and the final iteration is really good. It's not a difficult read. It's a fun read, honestly. It's fun to read. You would think that this might be legalese and really dense, but it's not. It's got really fun antidotes and I think people will really just enjoy the read. It's not hard. It's not dense. It's impactful. So kudos to you. It's a really well-written book.
Thank you. Yeah, what we really wanted to do with the book was make it accessible.
Yeah.
Right? If you flood it with legalese and you make it, I didn't want it to be a tortured read. You know, ultimately, I wanted it to be something where if you have a bad HOA, it almost lifts the fog of war.
Yeah.
Right? It sort of clarifies, okay, what is actually going on here?
Yeah.
Because as I looked at the space for a long time, you know, there's so many books on HOAs. Most of the books focus on HOA governance. You know, how to govern an HOA. Well, that's not helpful if you're dealing with a bad HOA. And the bad HOAs probably aren't reading those books in the first place.
Yeah.
And then there's other books that have been written on the topic of homeowners against, you know, dysfunctional HOAs.
Yeah.
And, you know, often it's by people who haven't been in the trenches. You know, we've been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah.
And there's this sort of misconception that if everyone comes together and kumbayas together, you know, the HOA is there in good faith, that you'll get resolution. But the reality is, from what we've seen, this is a form of warfare.
Yeah.
You know, you don't extend the olive branch necessarily. It's really bad individuals that drive these awful associations.
Yeah.
So we really approached it from that perspective. And then we said, okay, if you're dealing with a bad HOA, what are the best tactics? How do you approach the problem in a very tactical, you know, sort of positioning?
Yeah.
Right. And so my goal here ultimately was to empower the base of homeowners dealing with these bad associations to really give them guidance.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, you know, how we set it up. It's everything from you're sort of dealing with an initial dispute. You know, it's sort of, there's smoke kind of coming out of the association and it's preliminary, or you're in full-blown litigation.
Yeah.
Right. And attorney intervention was needed or required. So, you know, I think regardless of where you are on the journey or the path of a bad association, you could find specific chapters or you know, sort of tactics that can be implemented.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting too about the book, I mean, this has been about 1.5 years in the making.
Yeah.
and a year on the podcast, which it was interesting. We always knew that we were going to do the podcast. I mean, you had started the book, you were about 6 months into the book, and the podcast really, for people that listen to the podcast, the book is a version of the podcast, all built into one really fun guide, and it's really easy to get through, and so you don't have to listen to all 25 episodes of the podcast, but you should. But it's all here in the book. So everything we've talked about in this podcast, almost everything from the Meddler and the Tyrant and everything, it's more expanded on. It's here in the actual book, which is really great.
Right, it's laid out so you don't have to jump through different podcast episodes. And it's funny, it took about a year and a half to write.
Yeah.
But if you really look at it, I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, it really took 15 years to write.
That's a good point.
You had to be in the trenches for a very long time. And so when I actually wrote the book, it just kind of flowed very organically.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was sort of endless information that has sort of made its way into the subconscious, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and I think you really have to be in the trenches for a very long time to really understand the terrain, to understand what's happening, and actually provide advice that will actually move the needle.
Yeah.
That will allow homeowners to get traction against a bad association.
Yeah. And I mean, for people that don't know, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, you pretty much have an understanding of who you are in this space. But for those who don't, you want to give them just the quick, 30-second on who you are, your background in the space, and all that fun stuff.
I'm the owner of Carlson Law, California lawyer, and we have 2 operations right now. We have one in California, and we have a wonderful team out in Florida. And we've been in the space, like I said, for 15 years. And it was interesting because the firm started with a real estate and business litigation background. And we kept seeing these, clients of ours, CEOs or, various individuals who had disputes with their association. So 15 years ago, we were looking at it and we kind of dove into it because they wanted us to represent them against bad associations. And what we quickly realized is the space is somewhat complicated at the outset. Because in California, for example, you have CC&Rs, which are equitable servitudes. You have
can you do a non-lawyer
version of that?
Version of that?
It's contractual rights.
Okay.
So you have contractual rights. You have fiduciary, which is a big topic or big responsibility for associations that they owe to the homeowner. You have Davis Sterling in California, which is state law, and then you have case law, sort of interpreting all of this.
Sure.
So we spent a tremendous amount of time really diving in, looking at this. And what we realized is, notwithstanding the misconception that homeowner associations have all the power, homeowners have tremendous power.
Yeah.
But it has to be leveraged correctly.
Yeah.
And we often saw that, there was this true misunderstanding in the market where they just assumed association has all the rights, all the powers, and people didn't fight back. But when we started to fight back strategically and sort of leverage the code, leverage the contractual rights of the client, and sort of dove into the breach of fiduciaries that were happening, we gained a lot of traction and a lot of recognition early on.
Yeah.
And we've been at it ever since.
Yeah. 15 plus years. And then here in California and in Florida at this point too. Yeah. Which is really fun.
Yeah. Florida just celebrated their 5-year anniversary.
Has it been that long already?
Yeah.
That blows my mind.
Yeah. Tremendous team out there. And, nightmares happening in the beautiful state of Florida all the time.
I think it's worth mentioning, though, that this book wasn't just made for California and Florida residents.
Yeah. So the approach of the book was more agnostic to jurisdiction.
Sure.
I wanted to give just very general best practices that could be applied or sort of empower anyone regardless of your state.
Yeah.
And really the idea is you see these common themes of, okay, how to best approach an association. For example, we have clients who come to us, they have a really strong case, but they were so emotional at the outset. There was these, correspondence where they're yelling and screaming at the board, and rightfully so, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hold that against them.
Yeah.
These are nightmares. They impact you on a very visceral level.
Yeah.
But the communications, for example, are not helpful if we're going after them eventually through some sort of court intervention.
Yeah.
Right. So how do you approach it in a bit more of a clinical sense? How do you empower people when you approach a board? Instead of saying, hey, you're making my life horrible, you guys are a dumpster fire.
Yeah.
approach it from, hey, this is a clear violation of the CC&Rs, specifically this provision, right? It just elevates the approach and its best practices really regardless of where you are. Because it wasn't meant to comply with any jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And of course, as lawyers, we put a big disclaimer in there to always talk to a lawyer. But the interesting thing there too is it even gives advice when you do talk to a lawyer. What are best practices? Let's say, you're not able to work it out informally and attorney intervention is essential.
Yeah.
What are best practices when you partner with a lawyer?
Sure.
Right? There's a lot of strategy that just goes into that. How do you find a good lawyer?
Yeah.
Right? So we try to really arm and educate homeowners that are in these disputes.
Well, let's go through. I'm going to go through the contents of the book, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
And then people can kind of get an understanding of kind of the table of contents of this thing, and feel free to jump in with any sort of commentary that you'd like. So the book starts off with obviously the introduction, but we get right into the ABCs of HOAs.
Yeah, I thought that was important because you got to start somewhere, right? Yeah. And so there's a lot of misconception regarding, okay, what is the board? What is a management company? What is the developer? What are these documents I was given? And so you need to understand sort of what these big elements are.
The context of the whole thing.
Yeah. It's sort of laying the foundation of how the industry works.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's important. I mean, if you're going to jump into this, you might as well know, okay, what is the management's relationship to an association?
Yeah.
Who is the developer? Are they relevant?
Yeah.
And that also helps you identify, okay, what are the proper attack lines?
Yeah. So second section is, why do HOAs go bad?
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. And I think this is very nuanced. And I haven't seen anyone really articulate this. But over the years, we find the consistent, usual combatants.
Yeah.
And they're these avatars, if you will, of personalities.
Yeah.
You have this tyrant personality that just seeks power and is wreaking havoc. You have a meddler, someone who's constantly up in someone's business.
Yeah.
You have someone who's just absolutely incompetent.
Yeah.
And these are all personality types that can really sour an association very quickly. So you have to be mindful of, okay, who are you dealing with and what is the best approach with these different types of personalities?
Yeah.
Because there's different ways to approach a tyrant versus a meddler versus someone who's just incompetent.
Yeah. What's interesting, and we've said this so many times on the show, but it's ripe for just disputes because these are volunteers that don't have any sort of, a lot of them have never run a business. Or any sort of,
and now they're in charge of multi-million dollars worth of real estate.
I know it's almost wild if you think about it from that perspective. But and then they're voted in by other homeowners.
Yeah, and a lot of times people are very lackadaisical.
Yeah,
they know Billy and they say, Billy's a good guy. I see him when I walk the dog.
Yeah,
but they don't understand. Well, Billy was angling for power. That he wanted to take control of the board.
Yeah,
and now he's wreaking havoc.
Yeah,
so it's just to be mindful of these things.
Sure. Next section is issue spotting / common nightmares. And then I put in parentheses, the weapons that they use. Yeah.
So this is an interesting one. I really wanted to sort of elevate the vocab and put things on people's radar. Often the initial push is, oh my God, I hate my association. It's such a nightmare, without saying, okay, specifically why.
Yeah.
Let's isolate, okay, is it a common area issue? Is it the board is not following corporate governance,
excessive fines,
all of these things can be better categorized. And if we can start identifying from a factual perspective, okay, where do these typically arise? That in and of itself helps the homeowner sort of say, okay, this is a common area dispute or a governance dispute.
Yeah.
Again, elevating the vocabulary of the homeowner.
Yeah. I think this is the meat of the book too, is your ammunition / common causes of action.
Yeah. So this is, again, this was very general in nature, but I wanted to start having homeowners start looking at these things from a cause of action perspective.
Yeah.
And that's really the ammunition that they have.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, oh my God, they're horrible with the common area, it's a disaster. Well, let's use more sophisticated language, more empowered language. Yeah. And that instead of saying that, you say this is a violation of the CC&Rs.
Yeah.
This is negligence. This is potentially a breach of fiduciary.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, these are buzzwords that have meaning. It's very powerful language. So now your correspondence to the association, as opposed to, hey, I hate you guys are horrible. And I've seen that email before several times. Now it's, you're not taking care of the common area. It's caused massive damage to my property. This appears to violate the CC&Rs. This appears to be at least negligence.
Yeah.
You owe me a fiduciary. and it just packages and angles the case much better.
Yeah.
So eventually, if you do approach an attorney, the attorney can look at it and it has a little bit more to work with and sort of can dial in quicker on the case as well.
Yeah. Next section, going to war, the informal battlefields, and that's really the homeowner playbook.
Yeah, and this is interesting. I'm one of those attorneys who truly believe that if you can not hire a lawyer, if you can resolve something informally, that's a huge win.
Yeah.
So what are best practices when approaching a board? What are the different forums? What's the different methodology to bring a dispute in front of a board and try to work it out?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes these boards are so bad, attorney intervention is essential.
Yeah.
But again, if you can at least attempt to negotiate, resolve something without attorney intervention, I do think that that's a win.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I think a lot of homeowners that are reading this book they're going to be drawn to that section because most of them that are reading this book or have some sort of issue, and this is where the resolution.
Yeah, and the best outcome, when I do consult with homeowners, often I will say, run this play first.
Yeah.
Reach out to the board, demand some sort of IDR or informal dispute resolution, have a meeting with the board, go to an open session, lay out the case. And if that works, again, that's a huge win.
Yeah.
But sometimes it doesn't. And so if it doesn't, you have to pivot.
Which is the next section, going to war, courtroom battles, and that's more of the legal deep dive.
Yeah, I wanted to at least educate the population or, the homeowners who are dealing with bad associations where, informal didn't work. They're flipping it to maybe court intervention and just give them a general idea of what that might look like.
Yeah.
Because that's a big decision to file suit, to bring on a lawyer. These are huge business decisions ultimately, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at the impact of this. You're bringing on an advocate. So best practices would be to understand a little bit more of the industry, what to look for, and understand what does court intervention really mean.
What are you getting yourselves into?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The more educated you can be in this space, the better.
Yeah.
And even a lot of the hardened business individuals that we consult with, maybe they've never been through an arbitration. Maybe they've never been through litigation in court, superior court, or maybe they've never been to a mediation.
Yeah.
So this just kind of frames things out, kind of gives them an idea of what these.
All these words in and of itself could be foreign to the person on the other end of this thing, and it lays it out nicely.
Exactly.
All right. Retaining a legal warrior, lawyer selection, and maximizing impact.
Yeah. So if you can partner with a great lawyer, you're in a better position for success.
Yeah.
So how do you vet a lawyer? Sometimes this is the first time you've ever had to hire a lawyer. So really what I looked at is, okay, if I was in a homeowner's shoes, I'm not a lawyer from this paradigm, what would I be looking for? How do I vet a lawyer? How do I see, what is the social proof? What have they done before? What is their practice areas?
Yeah.
How to engage them? What to talk about during the first consultation? How to show up at a consultation well prepared?
Yeah.
Again, it's just stacking the deck in the homeowner's favor.
And I'll speak as an outsider to this. Just now knowing what I know is just because a lawyer handles real estate disputes in general sense, or even maybe real estate transactions and things along those lines, this is a kind of a different ball of wax.
It's a very niche area.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is I'll meet with homeowners who are like, I called like 4 real estate attorneys. They didn't want to touch the case. And sort of the perception there is, I don't have a good case. Well, it's not that. It's just that the attorney isn't familiar with the space.
The scarier, I think, the scarier version of that is they'll take it on having never done it before, and they misunderstand the terrain.
Yeah, and we've been brought on cases where we're the second opinion, and it could be a great real estate attorney who really does a great job in the courtroom, is a great litigator, and just botched the whole case.
Yeah.
And we have to step in, we have to unwind certain things, we have to start from a different starting point because their strategy, maybe waives certain rights. And it's unfortunate when that happens.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily because that's a bad lawyer, but the lawyer who took on the case got over their skis. Maybe underestimated the sort of complexities that are involved with this type of litigation or advocacy.
Yeah. And then most HOAs have counsel on the other side.
And they're very well heeled.
Yeah.
And it's interesting on the association side, there are great lawyers who represent homeowner associations. Again, we only represent the homeowners.
Sure.
And, those are the attorneys who understand the space, they understand state law, they understand fiduciary, they understand all of these things. And those associations tend to be pretty well functioning.
Yeah.
Versus really sort of associations that are engaged in malfeasance, and it's just really a bad situation. Often those are the worst attorneys that we have to deal with.
Yeah.
That have drank the Kool-Aid, or even worse, they've been weaponized against the homeowners themselves.
Yeah. And sometimes you have, like we've talked about many times on the podcast, sometimes there's the in-between. You have a terrible board, and sometimes the adult in the room is the counsel says, you guys, we need to,
Well,
this is going to be a problem.
That often is the perfect case scenario where we, fire off some sort of demand or we intervene, and the association counsel goes, oh my God, I had no idea how bad the board was. Because the board wasn't saying, hey, we're targeting this person, we're harassing this person.
Yeah.
And to bring it to the association attorney's counsel can be a huge win.
Yeah.
Because you got to kind of look at it from a hierarchy perspective. You have management company.
Yeah. And
oftentimes you see a lot of communication between the management company. And sometimes the information doesn't even get to the board. But then if it gets to the board, and the board is you have the Tyrant or you have a Meddler or whomever, they're not communicating to the attorney. But through attorney intervention, that might get that attorney on the phone with us. We can showcase the case, showcase what's happening. Yeah. And often what you see with a good HOA attorney is that attorney will intervene and sort of right the ship. Yeah. And that's a huge win.
Sure. Next section, proposed cures for bad HOAs.
Yeah. If you look at Florida, for example, I think that there's been a lot of really good reform there.
Yeah.
And so in the book, and we've been looking at this, we have an internal think tank sort of looking at different ways where we could better empower homeowners when they confront these bad HOAs. Yeah. And some of the ideas include, looking at more punitive repercussions for really bad boards. I mean, those who are engaged in malice, fraud, misrepresentation. Yeah. How can we make it more painful? Now, it's interesting there because if you're a good board member, if you're altruistic and you're really there to help the community, that sort of reform should not bother you. Yeah. Right? They're like, well, I'm not going to engage in malice or deceit or misrepresentation. I think the only people who are going to push back on this sort of push are those who are like, well, I don't want to get in trouble for this.
Yeah. Self-dealers.
Yeah, exactly. So that was one. Another concept that we came up with was more of a federal play, which would be to standardize mediation before having to go to litigation.
Oh, interesting.
And that would be an interesting way to resolve these disputes so that it's a little bit more economic. It's user-friendly, and it's almost a safe harbor. So if you're in this huge dispute with your association and you don't have the right to go to mediation, this would sort of mandate that as a precursor to a lawsuit.
Because some states, if you want to get your attorney's fees back, the laws say that you have to go through mediation.
Correct.
Or informal dispute resolution prior to the suit.
And that's how California is set up, largely. Yeah. And so just to make that more consistent throughout the U.S. Yeah. Because I think that's a great avenue, especially in California, because someone doesn't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to litigate. At least through the mediation, it's more cost effective, it's more streamlined, it's more contained, and it's just a shorter turnaround time. Yeah. But it also has a massive impact on the association. It forces them into a mediation. It forces them to, speak with a retired judge or a mediator. Yeah. And so that becomes a very effective way to resolve these disputes. Yeah. And so these are some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of, okay, how can we better the situation? How can we stack the deck better for the homeowner? Sure.
And then just the conclusion. The conclusion is titled "Take Your Power Back."
Yeah, let me read that. I think this is a good how we ended this. So,
well, there's a couple quotes. Let me go if you don't mind. Let me go through a couple of the quotes of the book because I think it'll be particularly. It's fun to give people a little insight. The biggest misconception among homeowners is that the HOA has all the power, but an HOA is merely a collection of volunteers. It's just people.
Yeah, here, I'm getting to this fact that there's this aura around an association or a board. Yeah. They have all the power. And it's funny, too, because, we've represented judges historically, good attorneys. Yeah. And they come in and they're like, wow, the association has all the power. These people are driving me crazy. And it's just turning that narrative. Yeah. And educating them, saying, you know what, those CC&Rs that you never read. Yeah. That's a terribly strong contractual base. So it's just, I think, flipping that narrative. Yeah.
All right. Got another one. An HOA case is not like going to a friendly neighborhood estate planner. It's more like triage in an ER. Sometimes bad has happened and life can't go back to normal until the bad thing is made right.
Yeah. So this is a different space. This is dispute oriented.
Yeah.
Right. This is, I mean, we have bad actors on the other side who will continue to, engage in misconduct until they don't, until you enforce those rights.
Yeah.
And, you look at some situations, they've been going on for 10 years and it keeps happening because no one enforced their rights.
Sure.
It's like the bully on the playground.
Yeah.
That bully's going to keep punching you in the face until you swing back.
Yeah.
That's really the theory or the undercurrent or the philosophy of that statement.
Yeah. And then I have the final bit of the book, but I didn't have it in this. I have it on the computer, which I think is a great conclusion to the whole thing, actually. Here's how the book concludes, and I think it's actually probably good on the podcast as well. It's time to correct the wrongs done to you. You don't have to remain passive. You don't have to stay in the nightmare. Sometimes you have to declare war to find peace, and this is the battle plan to do it right. Whether in war or peace, I wish you success on your journey.
Yeah, I think that sums up the book. It's this notion of fighting back, enforcing your rights. But if you don't do anything, you're going to be in that dumpster fire.
Well, I mean, how many times on this podcast have we seen people? I mean, just going through our Reddit posts and things. People are in these disputes for years,
right?
Which blows my mind. They have done nothing. They just hope it's going to go away. Never goes away. Hopefully, they can elect someone out of the position. But these are multi-year disputes sometimes before they reach your desk.
Yeah, and I think often what happens is it when no one fights back, when no one pushes back, it emboldens these bad HOAs.
Yeah,
they're like, oh, we're getting away with it.
Yeah,
why don't we continue the overreach? No one's doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think people live in these nightmares far too long.
Yeah.
And a lot of these disputes could be addressed very early on before they've really become this cancerous situation within a community.
Yeah.
So the sooner you fight back, the better.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome. Let's show the book one more time.
All right.
And I think there's the headline of that. It too, we got to read it. So it's
Bad HOA: The Homeowner's Guide to Going to War and Reclaiming Your Power. So
it's a great book. It's available. So Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025, and Amazon. It's on Barnes and Noble. It's available Kindle, paperback, hardcover. It's everywhere.
It's out there.
Yeah. And one more thing that the people have to know, that if you go to the Ellis Carlson website and go to the books page, you can download the first chapter. Enter your email, and you'll be sent the first chapter, and they can read the first chapter.
Yeah, I encourage that. Read that first chapter first.
Yeah.
Don't take our word. It's like the Costco model. Try to sample. And if it speaks to you, then buy the book.
Yeah.
So
it's a great book. Yeah, it's a good book. It's really awesome that this thing came to fruition.
I'm excited.
Nearly 2 years. It's exciting to see. I don't know. It's been exciting to be a part of it to some degree, and just see it come to fruition from the early writings of this thing, just to the cover, and seeing it in person was a really exciting moment.
It's been a treat.
Congratulations!
Well,
it's
thank
a huge
you, Marty, and
accomplishment.
thank you for all your help with it and input and expertise.
It was my pleasure.
So, all right, guys. Well, thanks for watching, and we will see you again.